What's up, guys? Nick the Informative Fisherman here, and I want to show you some really cool line mending tricks and tips to catch you extra fish and also make you fish a little bit more efficiently. So let's start off with the easy one first, the spinning rod. Okay, I'm throwing a wacky worm. Now let's say I bomb it out there and I let my line hang in the air. Well, if you look right out here, go ahead and take a look in the water. I'm gonna pop my line. You see that? I got a weird angle right there, and just now as I start to reel, my line's getting straight, going to my target. But if I'm throwing and it's really windy, that's gonna get more pronounced. Go ahead and come back to me. So if I throw up in the wind and the wind catches my braid and throws it out there, now you can see, if you look back down in the water, you can see it's a huge arc. I don't wanna be fishing with a huge arc in my line. So what the problem is, if you have arc in your line, you're not gonna feel the bite. You have all that slack. You don't even know the fish got it. And another problem is if you have arc and the wind's blowing it, that line's gonna be pulling against your worm instead of your worm falling where you actually wanted to cast. So there's a really cool trick to getting a straight line. So if you ever see those novices out there, you'll notice they have a lot of bow in their line. It's because they're not used to mending their line in the wind. So let's say I'm casting to my target. I can cast and I start to feather the spool with my hand, just like so. And all I'm doing is slowing my bait to a stop. I'm slowing my line at the end of my cast, just like a bait casting reel. Then I'm placing my line down against the water and I'm holding a nice straight line there. There's one other thing you can do too, is the higher the arc you have in your cast, if you throw up real high, you're gonna get more slack. So if it's really windy, you can fire a bullet cast and stop your bait before it gets to the target. Then your line will be nice and straight going out to your bait. But if it's real windy, you can't have any arc and you can't let your bait hit before you stop it on that reel. So now let's say there's a couple of objects out here. Let's say I'm bank fishing. Granted, I'm on a boat, okay? But this is a wacky rig that I'm throwing right here. Let's say I had a swimming worm, a grub, and I had multiple targets out there. Well then, heck, I could throw out there and I can control mend my line to those targets, and my bait is gonna follow the contour of that line and it's gonna swim right down those targets. The only difference is if you have bow with slack in your line and you feel that fish hit reel, make sure you get tight and then set the hook. Let's move on to some casting. All right, guys, now I want to show you the frog and a controlled mend with a Baitcaster. This is something you can do with a spook, you can do with a buzz bait, any of the braid baits, and you can do it with fluorocarbon. It doesn't work as good, but you still can. So let's look at this post right here at the end. This last post on the dock. If I am to cast straight at it, okay, there's a line now, look at me over here, and my line's tight. So I have a tight line going from the front of my boat all the way to there. That's a straight line, okay? So wherever my frog lands, that's the only time I'm in the strike zone. But you can see we had that big long dock right here to my side. So this time I'm gonna control mend. I'm gonna throw my frog to the target, but I'm gonna try to create a little slack in the air. And before my line lands, I'm gonna throw my line towards the object. So I'm gonna throw it out there and I'm gonna mend my braid closer to that structure and cover. Now my frog is much more parallel to the strike zone. And this is a really great thing to do. If you have a lot of toolies, if there's a whole wall of toolies, let's say, and the toolies are in 2 feet and you can't get the boat close enough to parallel, you could throw to one toolie, leave your line high, and mend that line. You could throw that line against the front of the toolies. And that's something I do all the time, and my frog will trace those toolies in and out. Instead of encouraging the fish to come out, I'm bringing it directly to them, and by that's control mending my bait directly into them by utilizing that slack line in the air and throwing it into the object instead. All right, guys, now I want to show you a control mend with fluorocarbon. The biggest difference between the fluorocarbon and the braid's much lighter, to where if you're trying that control mend, trying to throw a big boa line into that structure and cover to get it in tighter, you can get more distance. The fluorocarbon doesn't catch the wind as much, so you may be able to only get 6 or 8 feet extra of being able to place your line going towards the direction that you want it to go. But the benefit of the fluorocarbon is it sinks. So whatever control mend you put in there, your bait follows it extremely well. as the braid sometimes will cut out of the surface and you'll come out of your control mend partially. The fluorocarbon kind of stays in there the whole time. You could do this with any bait, doesn't matter, a plastic, a reaction bait, you name it, but it's going to make a massive difference. Remember, if you can control your cast, if you're gonna miss a post by this much, that fish may be willing to come out. You miss it by that much, that could be all the difference in the world, and we're only talking about 3 foot difference right there, guys. So control mend is absolutely critical, and when you're thinking of it and not thinking of it, the person who is thinking of it is gonna have more success. So now what's gonna happen is, as I make the cast, I want to throw that slack in the direction that I want to parallel. Now that braid's gonna sink at that angle. So whereas I start to work my bait down, my bait is not gonna pull away from the bank. I'm about 15 foot off, my bait's about 3 foot off, and my bait is gonna maintain in that shallow water, staying closer to that structure or cover. Like on, especially like a big swim bait that I'm throwing, you don't wanna throw it right to a post. You don't wanna throw it right to a dock. You wanna throw it past it. And if you control mend to it, you're gonna come right up against that structure or cover. You're gonna give those fish a trap point. You're gonna catch way more, guys. I'm gonna show you from the outside end a controlled mend here. So I wanna parallel the front of this dock, but you can see I'm on the inside edge of it. So I wanna cast over and throw my line out in front. Now you can see I'm under the front of that dock, and now I'm back under here. So now I'm creeping my glide right under the front of that dock. I am directly up against those posts right now. Now, if I was to just cast past it, you could see there would be a perfectly straight line. But instead, I casted over it. I controlled mend out to control my line, and then I brought it back under. That is a very, very valuable cast. That's something you will see every expert doing out there to lead to way more fish. All right, guys, so you can see here we have a perfectly parallel cast going straight down this dock. Now, I could probably throw precisely right on the end of this, but if you have an expensive swim bait like I'm using, I may want to throw a foot off and then kind of mend right. So I'm going to throw out. Now I'm going to mend my line to the right there into the shade line. And as you can see, I took a much safer cast, and I'm directly back into the target without having to crash my bait against it. And I also guaranteed that my line wasn't gonna get caught on the dock. And that's just a few cool mending tips, guys. Hopefully you learned something from this video. Greatly appreciate you watching. See you next time.